On the kitchen table, between the gravy boat and a folded paper turkey my mother bought at the dollar store, there was an envelope with my name on it. Inside was a notice. Pay the back rent by Friday, or be out by the end of the month. $650 a month. That's what my own mother had been charging me to sleep in my childhood bedroom. And now, on Thanksgiving morning, in front of the whole family, she slid that envelope across the table and said the words she'd been sharpening for 26 years. You're a guest in this house, Hazel. And guests who don't pay, don't stay. I didn't yell. I've never been a yeller. I picked up one small thing off the counter, a little cast iron bank shaped like a house, the one my grandfather gave me when I was 7, and I walked out the side door into the cold. What none of them knew, what I didn't even know yet, was that 3 days later, a bank manager would lock his office door behind me, pull down the blinds one by one, slide a worn navy folder across his desk, and say 6 words that would turn that whole table over. Miss Mercer. This house is yours. So before I take you back and show you exactly how my grandfather reached up out of the ground and handed me everything they thought they were taking, do me one small favor. Stay with me to the end of this one. Because the moment they paid the price for every dollar of rent they squeezed out of me, they paid it live, on camera, in front of 4.5 million strangers. Pull up a chair. Let's start at the beginning. My name is Hazel Mercer. I'm 26 years old. For 14 months, my parents charged me rent to live in a house that, on paper, already belonged to me. They just didn't know it. And I didn't either. They treated me like a tenant who'd overstayed her welcome, a line item, a freeloader, a problem to be managed. My younger brother lived in that same house for free, ate for free, drove a truck they paid for. But me? I handed my mother a $650 money order on the first of every month, and she took it with a smile that never reached her eyes. And then, when they decided they were finished with me, they put my things in trash bags and set them on the porch on a holiday morning. They thought that was the end of my story. It was the beginning of theirs. Before I tell you how it all came apart for them, quietly, legally, and then all at once in front of the entire internet, do me a favor. Tap that like button, hit subscribe, and ring the bell. And down in the comments, tell me where in the world you're watching from and what time it is for you right now. I read every single one, and I love knowing who's sitting with me tonight. If you've ever been the one in your family who had to earn a place that should have been free, you're going to want to hear all of this. Because what my grandfather built for me, in silence, over 9 long years, that's the part nobody, not one of them, ever saw coming. Let's go back. There's a kind of math that families like mine do, and from the outside, you'd never spot it. From the outside, the Mercers looked fine. Better than fine. My mother, Donna, ran a little nail salon on Route 9 in Harmon, Ohio, and a Facebook page she called, Blessed Life with Donna. My father, Greg, worked the loading dock at the distribution center off the highway for 22 years. We went to church. We waved at the neighbors. We looked like the kind of family that says grace and means it. But inside the house, there was a ledger nobody could see. And every child in that family had a column. My brother Cody was 2 years younger than me, and from the day he was born, he was the one the money flowed toward. Travel baseball. A truck at 16. Tuition for a business program he dropped out of in 1 semester. When Cody wanted something, my mother called it an investment. When I wanted something, she called it an expense. You're the easy one, Hazel, she used to say, like it was a compliment. You don't need much. I learned, real early, what easy meant in that house. It meant I was the one who could be skipped. The one whose birthday got, we'll do it next weekend. The one who carried the casserole, watched the door, did the dishes while the party went on in the other room. I was the part of the machine you only notice when it stops. And there was one person in the whole world who noticed before it ever stopped. My grandfather. Walter Kessler. Wally to everybody in town. My mother's father, though you'd have a hard time finding 2 people more different than Wally Kessler and his daughter Donna. But I'll get to him. Because he's the whole reason I'm sitting here telling you this with a roof over my head. First, you need to understand the rent. Here's how the rent started. When I was 19, my grandmother passed, and a couple of years after that, my grandfather's health started slipping. My mother announced, loudly, to anyone who'd listen at the salon, that she was sacrificing everything to move the family into Wally's house and take care of him. The truth was simpler. Wally had a paid-off 4-bedroom house on Hollow Creek Road that he'd built with his own 2 hands in 1968. My parents had a mortgage they were drowning in. So we moved in to help. And my mother started measuring that house for curtains before Wally's tea even got cold. I lived there too. It was where I'd grown up half my childhood, in the little back bedroom that looked out over Wally's workshop. It was home. Then Wally died. And 9 days after the funeral, my mother sat me down at that kitchen table, the same table, and laid out a household contribution agreement she'd typed up herself. $650 a month. Due the 1st. Late fee after the 5th. You're a grown woman now, she said, folding her hands the way she did when she'd rehearsed something. It's time you contributed like one. Your father and I aren't running a charity. I asked about Cody. Cody was 23, living in the basement, filming videos about passive income and building generational wealth for the 4,000 people who followed his account. He didn't pay a dime. Your brother's building something, my mother said. You're just working at the garden center. It's different. So every 1st of the month, I drove to the grocery store, bought a money order at the customer service desk, wrote rent on the memo line, and handed it to my mother in an envelope. And every month, I kept the receipt. The little carbon stub. I don't know why I kept them, at first. My grandfather had drilled it into me my whole life. Pay what you owe, and always keep the receipt. So I did. 14 months of stubs, rubber banded together in my sock drawer. I had no idea those little slips of paper were about to become the most important receipts of my life. If your own family ever made you pay for a place that should have been yours by blood, if they ever turned your belonging into a bill, type the word rent in the comments right now. I need to know I'm not the only one who ever wrote that word on a memo line. Let me tell you about my grandfather, because he is the hinge this whole story turns on. Walter Kessler ran Kessler Hardware on Main Street in Harmon for 41 years. A narrow store with a wooden floor that creaked in the same 3 spots, a brass cash register he refused to replace, and a key-cutting machine in the back that he'd let me run when I was tall enough to reach it. The place smelled like cut metal and machine oil and the peppermints he kept in a dish by the register. He wore a canvas work apron with a scorch mark on the pocket from a soldering iron, and he never patched it. He said a clean apron meant a man wasn't working. When I was 7, my mother started dropping me at the store on the afternoons she couldn't be bothered. Cody was in some program or other, I was extra. So Wally put me to work. He'd lift my backpack off my shoulders at the door and say, "Good, you're here." I've got jobs. Never to my mother. Always to me. He taught me to cut a key, how the blank sits in the jaw, how you trace the original, how the teeth have to be exactly right or the lock won't turn. A key's an honest thing, he'd say. It only opens what it's meant to open. No more, no less. And he taught me his big lesson, the one I didn't understand until I was 26 years old in a bank office. You don't build on a crooked foundation, Hazel. You make it level first, even if it takes all day. Level it underneath, where nobody's looking. Then you build. The summer I turned 7, he gave me the thing I'd carry out the side door 19 years later. A little cast iron bank, painted to look like a house, red door, green shutters, a tiny chimney. Heavy as a brick. He set it in my hands and said, "You put a little away in there when you can. Doesn't matter how little. And one day, you'll have a place of your very own that nobody can ever put you out of. You're supposed to break those banks open to get the money. I never did. Some things you don't break. I fed that iron house coins for 19 years and never once cracked it open. I want to tell you about the day my grandfather decided to do what he did, even though I didn't learn about that day until much later. When I was 17, my mother accused me of stealing from the salon till. $40 had gone missing, money she'd most likely miscounted, because it turned up in her own coat pocket 2 weeks after. But she didn't know that yet. What she knew was that there was a room full of her church friends, and a story to tell, and I made a convenient villain. She called me a thief in front of 8 women holding paper cups of coffee. And when I said, "Mom, I didn't take anything," she crossed the room and slapped me across the face hard enough to turn my head. Nobody moved. Cody smirked. My father studied the carpet. But Wally was there that afternoon, dropping off a fan he'd fixed. And Wally crossed that room, put his big flat hand on my back, and walked me straight out the door and into his truck. He drove me to the hardware store, sat me on the stool behind the counter, and pressed a bag of frozen peas from the break room freezer against my cheek with his own hand. Then he said something I've never forgotten. "Don't you cry where she can see it. You save that. Save all of it. And don't you ever beg a person to treat you right. You just quietly make it so they can't treat you any other way." I thought he was just comforting me. I know now he was telling me exactly what he was about to go do. Because that same week, I'd find this out years later, from a lawyer with a French press and a plate of cookies, Walter Kessler walked 3 doors down Main Street into a law office and asked one question. "Can I put my house in my granddaughter's name without my own daughter ever finding out?" The lawyer told him yes. He came back the next week with a cashier's check and a carpenter's pencil, because he didn't care for the pens they kept in the office. He signed the papers with that pencil, and the lawyer made him sign them again in ink. I was 17. I didn't know any of it. I just had a sore cheek and a grandfather who suddenly wanted me at the shop every single Sunday. Wally got sick the autumn I was 25. It moved fast, the kind of fast where the doctors stop talking about fighting it and start talking about time. I spent every evening I could at the house with him. I read to him. I cut his food. I held the cup while he sipped. My mother visited too, but her visits had a camera quality to them. She always seemed to be performing for someone just out of frame. He died in November, in the back bedroom of the house he built, with my hand in his. At the funeral reception, my mother outcried the room. She stood by the dessert table with a tissue pressed to her chest, accepting condolences like a queen accepting tribute. And in between the hugs, I watched her eyes drift, again and again, to the corner of the living room where my grandfather kept his strongbox and his important papers. She was looking at that corner the way a person looks at a safe they think they already have the combination to. She hadn't even taken off her coat, and she was already spending the house. The months after that were the rent months. The "you're a guest here" months. And by the next November, I could feel the temperature in that house changing. My mother had started saying things like, "Once we get the house sorted out, it'll just be our family again." Cody started measuring my back bedroom for a studio. My father stopped meeting my eyes, which, for him, was practically shouting. The night before Thanksgiving, I came downstairs for water near midnight, and I heard them in the dark kitchen. My mother's voice, low. "After the holiday," she said. "We do it the day after. Clean break. She'll land on her feet or she won't, but I am done subsidizing that girl in my own home. My own home." As if she'd laid a single brick. I went back upstairs. And for the first time in years, I lifted that little iron house bank down off my shelf and set it on the nightstand. I looked at the red door and the green shutters, and I don't know why, but I couldn't put it back. My body knew something before my mind did. If you've ever been the quiet one in a loud family, the one who hears the truth through the wall at midnight while everyone else is asleep, type "quiet one" in the comments. The quiet ones are always the last ones they expect. They didn't even wait for the day after. I woke up at 6:40 to the sound of too many footsteps for that hour. When I came downstairs, there were 3 black trash bags by the front door. My clothes. My books. My whole life, bagged like garbage, before the coffee was even made. My mother was at the kitchen table. The dollar store turkey, the gravy boat, and the envelope with my name on it. "Sit down, Hazel," she said. I didn't. She slid the envelope across anyway. The notice. The back rent. The out by the end of the month. Except there was a new line, handwritten at the bottom in her looping salon receptionist cursive, effective immediately. "You're a guest in this house," she said. "And guests who don't pay, don't stay." My father stood by the counter with his arms crossed, staring at the window like there was something fascinating happening in the yard. Cody came down the stairs with his phone already up, already filming, the little red dot glowing. "Yo, this is wild," he said to his 4,000 followers, swinging the camera between my face and the trash bags. "My sister's getting evicted on Thanksgiving. You can't make this up. Like and follow for part 2. He laughed. My mother didn't tell him to stop. My father didn't either. I looked at the 4 of them, the mother who'd charged me to belong, the father who couldn't look at me, the brother turning my worst morning into content, and I felt something I didn't expect. Quiet. A deep, level quiet, like a floor that's finally true. I walked past them. I picked up the little iron house off the counter where I'd set it the night before. I left the trash bags where they were. I'd come back for what mattered, and most of it didn't. And I walked out the side door, the one off the kitchen, in my coat and my socks and a pair of slip-on shoes by the mat. My mother's voice came after me, sharp as a tack. "You'll be back. You've got nowhere to go." I closed the door behind me without slamming it. All the way, soft, the way Wally taught me. You don't have to slam a door to close it. She was right about one thing. I had nowhere to go. But I had a heavy little iron house in my hands, and I had no idea, not yet, that it had been a key the whole time. I drove. No destination, just away. I ended up in the empty parking lot of the closed for the holiday grocery store where I'd bought 14 months of money orders, and I shut off the engine, and I sat there. The iron house sat on my lap. Cold. Familiar. I'd had it 19 years and never once looked inside. There's a rubber plug in the bottom of those old banks. I'd never pulled it. My fingers were shaking, and it took 3 tries, and when it finally came loose, coins spilled out onto my coat, quarters, dimes, a few wheat pennies older than my mother. But there was something else in there. Something that didn't rattle. A small cloth bundle, wedged up inside, taped to the roof of the little house so the coins wouldn't bury it. I worked it loose. Unwrapped it on the steering wheel. 4 things. The first was a brass key on a worn leather fob. Heavy, the way old keys are. Stamped into the leather, in letters worn soft by a thumb, home. The second was a slip of yellow paper, folded small, the pencil still dark after all these years. 4 words in my grandfather's blocky hand, "When the rent comes due." I read it twice. When the rent comes due. He'd written that years before there was any rent. He'd known. The third was a business card. Cardinal Savings Bank, Harmon, Ohio. Frank Doyle, branch manager. And on the back, in pencil, a 6-digit number, and a sentence. "Tell Frank you're Wally's girl. He's been waiting." The 4th was a photograph. Black and white, the corners soft. My grandfather, maybe 50 years old, standing on the front porch of the house on Hollow Creek Road, holding a baby in a white blanket. On the back, in pencil, Hazel. First day home. Hollow Creek. The day they brought me home from the hospital. To that house. The one my mother had just thrown me out of. I cried then. Not loud, I'm not loud, you know that by now. Just 2 minutes, in a cold car, with the snow starting to come down on the windshield, holding a photo of the first time my grandfather ever held me. Then I wiped my face. I put the 4 things in my coat pocket. And I drove downtown, to a brick bank building on Main Street, 3 doors down from where a hardware store used to be. I didn't know what I was walking into. I only knew that on a scrap of yellow paper, a man who loved me had written 4 words, and the bank he named was open, and I had nowhere else on this earth to go. Cardinal Savings sat on the corner of Main and 2nd, a brick building from 1911, with a brass door handle worn smooth by 100 years of hands. Inside, the floor was old marble, and a little fake Christmas tree blinked in the corner even though it was barely past Thanksgiving. A teller looked up as I crossed the lobby in my slip-on shoes and my crying-in-the-car face. She didn't flinch. I'll always respect her for that. I set the business card on the counter. My grandfather gave me this, I said. I think there might be an account. She turned the card over. She read the back. She looked at my face for half a second longer than she needed to. Then she picked up the phone, pressed one button, and said quietly, "She's here." She hung up and smiled. "Mr. Doyle will see you himself. Can I get you a coffee, hon?" 40 seconds later, a man in his 60s came out of a corner office. Gray cardigan, reading glasses pushed up on his head. He stopped a few feet from me and looked at me for a long moment. "You've got his chin," he said. "Not a question. Come on back, Miss Mercer. Bring whatever you carried in." I hadn't told him I'd carried anything. His office was at the back. A heavy wooden desk, beautifully made, and I knew, the second I saw the dovetail drawers, that my grandfather's hands had built it. On the wall, a photo, 2 younger men on a dock, holding up a stringer of fish, grinning. One of them was Frank. The other was Wally. Frank closed the door. He turned the lock. He walked to the window and lowered the blinds, one by one. Then he sat across from me and folded his hands. "Miss Mercer," he said. "Your grandfather has been waiting 9 years for you to walk through that door. And I've been waiting right alongside him." He opened the bottom drawer of the desk Wally built and took out a navy folder, soft at the corners from age. On the front, in pencil, "For Hazel. Hold until she comes in." He said it between us. He looked me dead in the eye. "Miss Mercer, this house is yours. It has been since you were 17 years old. Your grandfather didn't just leave you a key. He left you a way to take back everything they ever tried to take from you, quietly, and on paper. Now sit tight. Let me show you." Frank Doyle spent the next half hour walking me through that folder the way you teach a kid a card game. No fancy words. Just plain talk, page by page. He opened to the first one. A notarized photocopy. The Kessler Family Revocable Living Trust. Grantor, Walter Kessler. Successor trustee, Frank Doyle. Sole beneficiary, Hazel Renee Mercer. The signature was my grandfather's. The date was a Tuesday in the spring I turned 17, 11 days after my mother slapped me in front of her church friends. He'd done it that same week. Just like he'd promised himself. In the eyes of the law, Frank said, as of that day, your grandfather no longer owned that house outright. The trust did. And the trust belongs to you. He kept the right to live there until he died, that's called a life estate. But the title underneath, that's been yours for 9 years. He turned a page. When he passed last November, the trust converted from revocable to irrevocable, automatically. The property transferred to you by operation of law. No court. No probate. No daughter ever had to know. He turned another page, and his voice went quiet. Which means, Miss Mercer, your parents have been charging you rent to live in a house that you own. And they've been living in it, rent-free, for 14 months. They don't have a leg to stand on. They never did. I had to look up at the ceiling for a second to keep myself together. Then he showed me the bank account. A payable on death account, opened years back, beneficiary line, my name. Balance the day Wally died, $74,000. He'd been adding to it every spring, small bills, cash, from hardware jobs he never told my grandmother about. The last deposit had a note attached, for the roof. And whatever they try. And then Frank slid 3 sheets across the desk. Bank memos. Each one stamped at the bottom. The first, 9 days after the funeral. Donna Mercer appeared requesting release of father's accounts. Informed she is not the named beneficiary. Departed upset. The second, 4 months later, Donna Mercer appeared with copy of birth certificate, requesting rightful inheritance. Informed designation is irrevocable. Departed upset. The third, last spring, Donna and Greg Mercer appeared requesting hardship meeting. Mr. Mercer raised his voice. Mrs. Mercer stated at exit, she doesn't even know. She doesn't deserve to know. She came to this bank 3 separate times, 3 times, trying to take it. And she never told me. She charged me rent with one hand while she clawed at this counter with the other. She came here 3 times, I said. She did, Frank said. And your grandfather told me, years ago, if Donna ever came to me 3 times, it meant she was about to do something cruel to you. Something direct. He looked at me carefully. You walked in here this morning, Miss Mercer. I'm guessing she did the direct thing. I told him about the trash bags. The envelope. Thanksgiving. Frank Doyle took off his reading glasses and rubbed his eyes for a long moment. Then he laid one more page on the desk, a list of everything I now owned. The house on Hollow Creek, market value around $310,000. The account, $74,000. Wally's tools and his old pickup, another $40,000. Close to $430,000. He tapped the page with one finger. Your mother told my tellers, twice, in this lobby, that you were a freeloader living off her charity. I'm sitting here with $430,000 that says otherwise. Your grandfather didn't just leave you a house, sweetheart. He left you the receipts. If you're on my side right now, if you needed to hear that an old man saw all of it and made it right, type Team Hazel in the comments. Because what was waiting for me in that vault is the part one still can't talk about without my hands shaking. Before I left, Frank walked me to the vault. Safe deposit box 114. He set the long metal drawer on a little table in the privacy room, said, "Take all the time in the world," and stepped out, pulling the door almost shut. 2 things inside. The first was a small object wrapped in a square of canvas, the same scorched canvas, I realized, as my grandfather's old work apron. Inside it, a second brass key, smaller, with a paper tag. Workshop. For when you're ready to build. The second was an envelope. Cream-colored, my name on the front in his blocky hand, from my Hazel, when you come home. I opened it. 2 pages. The handwriting on the first page was steady. By the second page, the lines sloped down at the ends, the way his hand shook in that last hard year. Hazelnut. If you're reading this, then your mother finally did the thing I always knew was coming. I'm sorry I'm not standing next to you. The only way I could protect you was to get out ahead of her, years ahead, and so that's what I did. I saw all of it. The slap at the salon. The birthdays they forgot. The way they made you small so your brother could feel big. I never said it out loud to you, because I knew that if I did, you'd feel you had to choose between your mother and the truth. And no child should have to make that choice. So I made it so the choice didn't exist. I put it on paper, where feelings can't touch it. The house is yours. The money is yours. The receipts are yours. None of it can be undone, no matter how much she screams, and she will scream. You were never the easy one because you needed less, baby. You were the easy one because you gave more. You're the only soul in that house who ever cut a key straight, who ever kept a receipt, who ever closed a door without slamming it. Don't argue with them. Don't explain yourself. Just come home, and build something true on a foundation I leveled for you a long time ago. I love you, Hazelnut. Grandpa. I sat with that letter a long time. When I came out, Frank was waiting in the hall with his hands in his cardigan pockets, and he didn't ask me a single thing. He just walked me to the door, and as I left, he said, "Call the number on the back of his card tomorrow. Peg's expecting you." I drove to a cheap motel out by the highway. I paid with my bartending tip debit card. I locked the door of room 12. And I slept, for the first time in 2 days, like a person who finally knew where she stood. When I turned my phone back on, there were 19 missed calls. My mother, mostly. The first voicemail, from that morning, honey, maybe we moved a little fast, come home and we'll talk. The 5th, hours later, sharper, if you went to that bank, you need to understand that money is family money, your grandfather wasn't himself at the end. The last one, near midnight, a whisper, whatever they told you in there, Hazel, we can fix this. As a family. I deleted them all. And in the morning, I called Peg. Margaret Voss, Peg to everyone, kept a law office on the 2nd floor of an old building 2 doors from the bank. 68 years old. Silver hair to her shoulders, a black blazer, and a handshake she gave you with both hands. You look just like him, she said when I walked in. She poured me coffee from a French press and slid a plate of butter cookies across the desk. Eat one, she said. So I did. Then she opened a navy folder identical to Frank's. She'd kept her own copy for 9 years. Your grandfather drew all of this up with exactly one outcome in mind, she said. Today, we turn the key. You sign 2 pieces of paper. I do the rest. She explained it the plain way. In Ohio, anybody living in a home without a lease, without paying rent to the owner, without any ownership stake of their own, they're what the law calls a tenant at sufferance. My parents, my brother, that's what they become the moment the title passed to me. People living in my house at my mercy and nothing more. We serve them a written notice to leave, Peg said. 3 days, under Ohio law, to vacate. When they don't, and people like your mother never do, I file a forcible entry and detainer action in municipal court. The court sets a hearing inside of a couple of weeks. They'll have no lease, no deed, no defense. The judge issues a judgment for possession. After the appeal window closes, the court issues a writ of restitution, and the bailiff schedules a set out. The locks get changed. It's over. She looked at me over her glasses. You don't owe these people a fight, Miss Mercer. You owe them paperwork. The state of Ohio handles the rest. I signed both pages with the heavy pen she handed me. There was no thunder, no music. Just a pen, and a Tuesday, and a quiet click as the future locked into place. One more thing, Peg said, sliding over the rubber-banded stack I'd given her, my 14 months of money order stubs. These are beautiful. Every one of these is your mother accepting rent on a property she had no legal right to. You kept the receipts, just like he taught you. She smiled, small and sharp. She'll be in that house on the day the bailiff comes. Her kind always thinks the law is bluffing. It is not. The process server's name was Dana Reyes. 41, licensed in 3 counties, a body camera clipped to her jacket because she'd learned the hard way that people lie about what they said at their own front door. She knocked at the house on Hollow Creek Road on a Monday morning. My mother answered in a salon smock, in the middle of doing a neighbor's color in the kitchen, wearing the bright public smile she'd practiced for 30 years. Mrs. Mercer? I have a 3-day notice to vacate, issued on behalf of the legal owner of this property. Service is complete as of right now. My mother read the page. I watched the recording later, so I can tell you exactly how her face came apart, slow, like a wall deciding whether to fall. Then she got to the line at the bottom. On behalf of property owner Hazel Renee Mercer. She tore the notice in half. Right there on the porch. Dana didn't blink. That's all right, ma'am. I've got 3 more copies and a recording of this whole conversation. The clock started the second I said hello. You have a good day. She walked back to her car and drove off, and my mother stood in the doorway holding 2 halves of a piece of paper with my name on it, and a neighbor with half a head of foils watching from the kitchen. That week, my mother sent Peg 11 emails, 2 handwritten letters, and showed up at the office twice without an appointment. Peg answered all of it with one single line, Mrs. Mercer, my client does not owe you a conversation. Goodbye. My mother hired a lawyer of her own, a kid 3 years out of school with an office in a strip mall. He read the trust. He read the title insurance policy my grandfather had paid for in full back in the spring I was 17. He called my mother on the second day. Ma'am, you have no case. No ownership, no lease, and there's a title policy that'll bury us. I'm sending my bill. His bill was $400. My parents were still in the house on the day the hearing came. The judge was a woman named Loretta Banks, 20 years on the municipal bench. She read the trust. She read the deed. She looked at my parents over her glasses for a good 4 seconds of silence. The title is clear, she said. The owner is asking for possession. The court grants it. You'll need to be out by the end of the month. Judgment for possession. The appeal window opened and closed with nothing in it. The writ of restitution issued. The bailiff's office set the lockout for a Friday morning. I wasn't there. I learned how it went the same way most of the country did, from a screen. Because my mother had spent that final week trying to get someone to tell her side of it. She called the local news. They passed. She emailed a podcast. They passed. So on the morning of the lockout, she decided to tell it herself. She didn't have a following of her own worth the name. So she borrowed my brother's. At 10 that morning, my mother sat down on the leather couch in the living room of a house she no longer owned, in a white cardigan she'd chosen because she believed white said innocent. Cody set up his ring light. He flipped his phone around to the 4,000 followers he'd been promising, part 2. You sure about this, Mom? He said. My numbers have been kinda soft. This will go viral the right way, she said. She went live. 12 people watching. She started crying before she started talking, which was her first mistake. She hadn't paced it. My own daughter is doing this to her family, she wept. After everything I sacrificed. She's putting her parents out on the street. The comments started rolling. 40 viewers. Then 200. Then 1,000. And somewhere in the flood of her own grief, my mother said the sentence that ended her. I only ever asked that girl for a little rent. A little rent, to live in my house. And this is how she repays me, she takes the whole house out from under us. The comments turned over all at once, like a wave. Wait, you charged your own daughter rent? Whose house is it, ma'am? Sounds like it's hers. Ma'am, you just said she takes the whole house, so it is her house? Where is the daughter? Somebody find the daughter. 5,000 viewers. Then 12,000. Then 30. My brother, behind the camera, started whispering, Mom. Mom, stop talking. Mom. But she couldn't hear anything anymore except the sound of her own performance. And then, at 11 sharp, there was a knock at the door. My mother brightened. She truly brightened. That'll be the news, she told the camera. Finally, somebody who'll listen. See, baby? People care about our story. She opened the door. Deputy Ray Cobb stood on the porch in a green winter uniform, a clipboard in his hand, a locksmith and a second deputy behind him. Mrs. Mercer, I have a court-ordered writ of restitution. This property belongs to Hazel Renee Mercer. You've got 30 minutes to gather essential personal items. Anything left will be inventoried and held for pickup. 60,000 people watched my mother's mouth fall open. Watched her understand, in real time and on camera, that the law was not bluffing. The comments detonated. Her daughter owns the house. This is the greatest plot twist on the internet. Protect Hazel. My brother dropped his phone. The stream tilted to the ceiling, then went black for a second. When it came back, nobody was managing the camera anymore. And that's when my father walked into the frame. He'd been sitting at the breakfast table all morning, the way he sat through everything, with a cup of coffee gone cold an hour ago. He walked past my mother, past the deputy, all the way out onto the porch. He sat down heavily on the top step. He looked out at the bare November yard for a long, long moment. And then, not knowing or not caring that the phone caught every word, my father said it. It was never ours. He shook his head slowly. Hazel's. It was always Hazel's. He told me once it would be. I just didn't want to know. My mother spun around. Her face was coming apart in a way I'd never once seen it do, a real expression, maybe the first real one in 26 years. "Why didn't you fight for me?" she said. My father looked up at her from the step. And he said, quiet and final, "Because we shouldn't have done it, Donna. Any of it. To that girl." The stream cut out for good. My brother deleted his account within the day. But by then, somebody had clipped my father on that step. It was never ours, it was always Hazel's, and that clip passed 4.5 million views before the weekend was out. If you felt the whole thing turn over in that 1 second, if you've ever watched the truth walk up to somebody's front door and knock, type karma in the comments. Because she earned every single view. My parents moved into a 1-bedroom apartment over a tax office on the edge of town. $1,100 a month, no yard, thin walls. My mother had told the leasing agent she needed a place with good light for filming. She ended up with a window that looked at a parking lot. I found out later where all the money had gone, the money they swore there'd never been enough of, for me. My aunt told me over coffee. Years of my brother's programs and gear and investments. A salon expansion that collapsed before it opened. 3 vacations they took without me. A few thousand sunk into a supplement brand Cody was sure would make them all rich. By the time the bailiff came, my parents had less in the bank than the rent they'd squeezed out of me in a single year. My mother shut down Blessed Life with Donna 2 weeks after the video. The top comment on every old post, every single one, was a stranger asking the same question. "Where's Hazel?" My brother lost his little following and his brand deals inside a week. He moved into that 1-bedroom apartment with my parents and slept on a pull-out couch in the same living room where he used to film himself talking about generational wealth. On a Tuesday in December, my mother texted me. "We did the best we could with what we had. Someday you'll understand." I didn't answer. But on a Sunday near Christmas, my father texted me too. The first message that man had ever sent me on his own, in my whole life. "Hazel. I know I've got no right to your time. I'm writing anyway, because I owe you the writing of it. I should have stopped your mother 100 times over the years, and I never once did. I'm a man who lets things happen. I see that now. I won't bother you again unless you tell me you want me to. I'm sorry. Not so you'll forgive me, just because it's the only true thing I have left to give you. Dad." I read that one 14 times. I didn't answer it. But I didn't delete it either. On a clear, cold Saturday in late winter, a few months after the morning my mother set my life on the porch in trash bags, I drove up Hollow Creek Road and parked in front of the house my grandfather built in 1968. Deputy Ray Cobb was waiting with a new set of keys on a ring. "Welcome home, Miss Mercer," he said. I'd cried plenty of times since Thanksgiving. I didn't cry then. I shook his hand, and I let myself in with the original brass key, the one stamped home, the one Wally carried for half his life. The rooms were mostly empty. They'd taken what they considered theirs. But the wood floors Wally laid were still there. The smell of cut metal and oil still lived faintly in the back of the house. The fireplace was cold and clean. I set the little iron house bank on the mantel, right in the middle, where my mother used to hang her own stocking. The next week, I used the second key, the one from the vault, the workshop key, and let myself into Wally's shop out back for the first time since he died. And up on a shelf in the corner, under a drop cloth, I found a wooden crate with my name on the side in marker. Inside were 5 small iron banks. Houses, just like mine. He'd been collecting them, painting them, one at a time, over the years, red doors, green shutters, tiny chimneys. 5 more houses, in case the one he gave me wasn't enough to get the lesson through. And underneath them, a cigar box. Inside, a thick roll of small bills, rubber banded, and a ledger in his hand. Every spring, a deposit. And a note clipped to the front. For when they charge you to belong somewhere you already do. Pay them if you have to, Hazelnut. But no, I already paid it back, in advance. You were never the cost. You were always the inheritance. He'd known they'd charge me rent. He'd set aside the money to cover it, years before it happened. He couldn't stop them from being who they were. So he just quietly made sure they could never take a single thing from me that he hadn't already paid back. I knelt on the cold workshop floor and let myself cry the way you cry when you're not afraid of being heard, because for the first time in my life, there was no one in the house who could use my tears against me. Let me tell you the one true thing I learned from all of this. My grandfather didn't rescue me. People want to say he rescued me, and it isn't quite right. The hand on that side door on Thanksgiving morning was my own. The drive to the bank was mine. The signature on Peg's papers was mine. What he did was rarer than a rescue. Years before I ever needed it, he saw the whole thing coming, the slap, the rent, the trash bags, the cold morning. And instead of fighting a war he wouldn't live to finish, he leveled a foundation underneath me where nobody was looking. He cut a key. He bought a policy. He hid a house inside a house, and he wrote, on a scrap of yellow paper, when the rent comes due. And then he sat on that secret for 9 years and never told me, because he never wanted me to feel I had to choose. That's the part the loud people never understand. They think love is the thing you shout across a room. But real love is usually the quiet thing. It's the man in the back of the hardware store, cutting a key straight while everyone else is putting on a show. So if you're the quiet one in a loud family, if you've ever been made to feel like a guest where you should have been an heir, I want you to hear me tonight. The people who really love you don't always say it. Sometimes they say it in a deed. Sometimes they say it in a key with home stamped on the leather. Sometimes they spend 9 years building you a door, and they leave it exactly where you'll find it on the worst morning of your life. I'm Hazel Mercer. I'm 26 years old. I live at 9 Hollow Creek Road, in the house my grandfather built with his own 2 hands and put in my name when I was 17 and handed me with a key hidden inside a little iron house on the coldest morning I've ever known. There's a fireplace in my living room. There's a small iron house on the mantel. And there's a real door, the one he built for me before I ever knew I'd need it. I closed it tonight. Soft. All the way. If this story found you tonight, do me one last favor. Share it. Somebody out there is sitting in a house where they're being charged to belong, and they need to know the foundation might already be theirs. Subscribe if you want more stories like this one, real people, real boundaries, real justice. And tell me down in the comments, who was the quiet person in your life who saw you when no one else did? I'll be reading every word. Take care of yourselves. And remember, nobody gets to charge you rent on a life that was always meant to be yours.